And this is going to be the start of the build of the ultimate ntc3. As you can see, I have some of the parts already laid out. Some of the parts already used, some are brand new. We have a pile of titanium screws, some blocks, brake cam. This is going to be all clutch pieces right here. All of the suspension pieces, the new axles, all the little odds and ends. And you can see that this is just a bare chassis. The only thing that's going to be on this chassis is the steering links. Fresh chassis. So one of the first things we probably will be doing is doing the diff casings. I have the aluminum diff casings here and here. And we will be installing the diffs. As you can see, I have a brand new Team Associated one-way diff. So before we install the bottom of the diff, we're going to install the one of the blocks right here that's going to hold the hinge, this blue part right there. And in the rear, it's going to be harder to get to with the diff case, the bottom of the diff case actually being installed. So now that we have the bottom half of the diff in, we'll be using this brand new shim kit to put on the bearings so that we could install the front diff. And I wouldn't say use Loctite on this, because if it's gear strips, it's going to be harder to get off. But make sure you snug it and grease it. And this is what it should look like. So the shims go on the inside of the bearing. The new diff setup, we will be adding a new drive cup, brand new, with some new shims and a new pin that will go on this part right here. Also, another little tip is to put little washers underneath the diff so that it raises the diff about 1 millimeter, so that you have a lot of clearance right here, because this piece kind of sort of rubs a little bit right there. So you can actually raise it 1 millimeter so this won't be really rubbing. You can see the shims in the very bottom of the diff all around, and that basically frees up all of this. There's no binding, no touching. Last but not least, you want to grease the gear using some black grease. So with the rear diff, we're going to tighten it all the way down until it's really hard to twist. And we're going to be running a lock diff in the rear, basically something similar to a solid axle in the rear. So one way in the front, solid in the rear. Next we have the K Factory brake cam and hub combination, and we'll be putting on brand new brakes on it, and that's going right here. Now that we have those pieces put on, we'll be moving to the transmission, which is right here, and we'll be using a new shim kit and a brand new shaft on my old setup. So there was a comment made on one of my videos, being that the car wasn't going into 2-speed, and it wasn't, and that was because the engine was very underpowered. And when you do a setup like this using the Mugen springs for the shoe engagement, you have to have a motor that's actually powerful enough to actually engage it. And now we do. We have the Nova Rossi right here that will be powering this car. So now that we have our new rear outdrive hub, we got the 2-speed shoes on. So basically what you want to do is, when you put this on, these right here, and you're going to put these on here before you put on the gear because that's what's going to give you a little bit more free play when you put on the Sentex clutch, so it won't be so close and it won't rub against each other and damage all the gears. We'll start building on the front, and we'll be installing some brand new hinge pins, and we're going to try to complete the front, put the bumper on, and we're going to work our way back to the chassis plate, gas tank, and work on the rear end with the floating wing mount. So now that we have the hinge pins in and some of the front assembly, as you can see, I added the titanium screws and aluminum shock bushings, and this will be a good time to put on the brand new CVD bones onto these axles and install them. Now that we have the axles in and the front bumper plate, we can move on into put on the bumper brace and working our way to the back. Another tip here is when you use any of the K Factory pieces like the bumper plate and all of these blocks, like the blue block down there and in the rear, sometimes they might leave a little gap. So in the front there will be a gap, so you can use a shock bushing or a shock seal and it'll take up that little space in between there. And this will also be a good time to install the front roll bar, which is also K Factory. For some applications, when you're using the RPM bumper like I am, you might have to cut the rear third hole out, just because it binds with the K Factory aluminum roll bar. So now that the bumper has been installed, and these are meant to hold down the front diff to sturdy it up a little bit. There's a aluminum shaft on a longer screw, and it has a washer on the end. It used to be sold by MIP, but since they're not around anymore making TC3 parts, you just have to compromise and try to find something that will look like this that'll be able to work. So for my application, I have to drill my shock tower so that they can fit inside of the top holes right there. And this is how it should look. So before we start working on the rear of the car, you can see I have the old arms on. We will actually have to break down this setup of the floating wing mount and change around a couple pieces to make sure that we could get this to work properly and fit the same way it did on the previous car. But also we will have to install the upper deck, which is right here, with the K Factory aluminum servo mounts, transponder mounted aluminum antenna mount as well. So here we have the upper deck installed, no electronics yet, and also tightening up the front hub. Ready to start working on the rear. So the rear, I'm not going to put on the new axles yet until everything is actually running and make sure everything is right, so those axles won't get scratched up. But I will have to take apart the rear hub here. Just use the arms because this setup already has its own hubs. So here we have the rear on, and it came out really good. We have the 15 gram weight on installed. Everything fits perfect, no issues according to the rear. We have the modified air diffusers on, The only issues that I ran into today was that the one-way diff that I wanted to put on the front didn't work, because this is actually for an electric car, so the out drives are actually shorter. So there's only two things that I can actually do, is just to not use it or find the right length out drive, because these actually do come out. So find one for the nitro tc3 or just gas tank, and maybe mount the engine. But the suspension will be in another part, because it is mostly all brand new parts and will need to be put together from scratch. Drive team is really smooth, real easy to turn. Brooklyn Beast. As you can see, this is a brand new gas tank. Never opened, never used. Just adding in some final touches.